Northern Canada's Klondike Trail. From historic Dawson City, tracing the path of 19th century gold prospectors, to the city of Whitehorse and Alaska beyond. Dawson City's modern-day gold rush.
The miners didn't leave here because all the gold was gone. They simply left because the prospects were better elsewhere.
The Klondike Trail's best-known treat.
Rurn Lodge is famous for cinnamon buns. They're quite large and quite tasty.
And a northern legacy on the Yukon's Iron Highway.
It was built because it was the shortest landmass to go to Dawson City.
Now, we reveal the secrets of Canada's northern boundary, more than 160,000 kilometers of Arctic frontier. Canada, over the edge. "50 kilometers east of the Alaska border, in the heart of Canada's Yukon Territory, the Klondike Highway leads to the iconic community of Dawson City. Dawson City is located on the shores of the Klondike River, a northern gem surrounded by a soaring, rugged landscape, holding secrets of the past. High above the town, this vast crater is known locally as the Moosehide Slide. It is a massive imprint, marking the aftermath of a violent event that occurred more than 1,700 years ago. Scientists still don't know exactly what happened. They call it a slope failure at the contact point between two northern terrains, causing millions of tons of rock to fall far below. And at the base of the slide, the town of Dawson City is an enigma of its own. While the region has been home to First Nations people for centuries, the town site was built more recently, at the height of the 1897 Klondike Gold Rush.
Dawson is about as far north on the Klondike Highway as most people like to venture, especially in the winter. It's the end of the road, so it has that frontier-like atmosphere. So while all the miners were out on the creeks, a fellow named Joe Ledoux realized that this strike was something quite extraordinary. And he knew that there needed to be a service and supply center near the gold fields. And as a result, instead of staking a gold claim, he staked the town site of Dawson City and started parceling off lots.
But according to Janice Cliff, Dawson's early days held little resemblance to the pristine community of today.
Dawson City, Paris of the North, was nothing in 1897. It was a swamp. Rudimentary log cabins and wall tents were set up. The first business in Dawson is rumored to be either a saloon or a sawmill. You have to think of Dawson as a service and supply center, not this incredible place that it grew to be.
More than a century later, visiting Dawson is like traveling through time. Reminders of the gold rush days are everywhere. From storefronts of another era to antiquated mining technology abandoned in the hills surrounding. Just outside town, Dredge Number 4 is one of those relics. For decades, Dredge Number 4 dug deep beneath Bonanza Creek and the water surrounding in search of gold. Dredge Number 4 is 8 stories high, weighing roughly 3,000 tons. With a bucket capable of digging 17 meters below water. It was a unique operation, lifting gravel laden with gold at the front of the dredge, separating that gold with a revolving screen washing plant in the middle, then shooting the remaining gravel out the back. The riches here were so abundant that Dredge Number 4 once produced 800 ounces of gold in just one day, an amount worth well over $1 million today. Dredge Number 4 ceased operations in 1960, the largest wooden hull bucket line dredge in North America. Today, it is a National Historic Site of Canada. But the Yukon Gold Rush didn't last forever. Once prospectors had gotten rich from the plentiful hills surrounding Dawson, word arrived that even greater riches were to be found further west.
By August of 1899, there were rumors of gold on the banks of Nome, Alaska, and 2/3 of the population spilled out to the river and headed to Nome. We lost 10,000 people in 1 week, and it goes to the nature of the gold miner. You're a gambler, you're a prospector, and the diggings might be better in Nome. So for all of those that couldn't get a claim here, as soon as you hear buzzes of a strike in Nome, you're gonna try and get there ahead of the pack.
Activity in Dawson slowed for a while, but it didn't mean the mining industry in the Yukon was dead forever.
The miners didn't leave here because all the gold was gone. They simply left because the prospects were better elsewhere. But then, of course, we evolve mining technologies, bring in the steam shovel, dredging operations. And so with a change in mining regulations that went from 1 claim per person to large tracts of land being granted, they were called concessions, this sort of opened the door for corporate mining. And we actually had quite intensive investment in the region. Families like the Guggenheims or the Rothschilds brought their investment capital to begin 60 years of dredging the gold fields.
And decades later, Dawson remains a mining hotbed. Just kilometers from the scenic townsite, dozens of gold mining operations flourish. Some reworking the same ground mined by prospectors over a century ago. But with new tools comes new opportunities. Here, bulldozers remove a top layer of dirt, digging down to the mineral-rich gravel seams known as the pay. The pay is then run through a sluicing plant, a machine designed specially to separate sand and gravel from gold. The miners will move as much pay as they can through the sluices with the use of dump trucks and backhoes. Once in the sluice, the pay is washed, with water piped in from streams nearby. In the end, hundreds of tons of earth is moved in the hopes that just a few precious ounces of gold will be found, glittering in the wash plants where it collects.
I think that's an interesting thing.
This one piece will make 52 layers.
Watch on mobile devices or the big screen, all for free. No subscription required.
Continuing south from Dawson City, we follow the contours of the Yukon River. The Yukon River originates in northern British Columbia, flowing through the Yukon and Alaska, and emptying into the frigid waters of the Bering Sea. It is an historic waterway. Some anthropologists believe the Yukon River Valley was the primary immigration route south for the first human inhabitants of North America. More than 10,000 years later, the river would be famous once again. The Yukon River became a marine highway for prospectors during the Klondike Gold Rush, traveling from Lake Bennett in the southern Yukon to Dawson City on paddle wheel riverboats like this one. To the east, spectacular northern landscapes line the banks of the Yukon River. Here, Haystack Mountain stands 900 meters high. A remote landmark some 40 kilometers south of Dawson City. Further east, rolling hills stretch as far as the eye can see, with peaks like Wounded Moose Dome and Grizzly Dome rising more than a kilometer high. And throughout the region, the Yukon's fall colors are ablaze. An awe-inspiring sight that draws visitors from around the world. Now, in early September, these colors are at their peak, but they won't last forever. This stretch of Yukon could see snowfall in a matter of weeks. Heading south, we reach another scenic Yukon waterway. The Stewart River is a tributary of the Yukon River, extending 500 kilometers to the east. Like the Yukon and Klondike rivers, the Stewart River region was the site of mining operations in the 19th century. But while much of the Yukon was mined for gold, the area surrounding the Stewart was rich in silver. Today, the SS Kino is a reminder of that era, a Stewart River workboat on display in Dawson City to the north. Beyond the Stewart River and continuing southeast, the Yukon's awe-inspiring fall colors lead to one of the territory's most unique peaks, Volcano Mountain. Volcano Mountain is an active cinder cone volcano, one of the youngest in northwestern North America. It is believed to be just 10,000 years old, covered in bare, visible lava flows that may have been active just a few hundred years ago. Volcano Mountain is a landmark to residents here, including generations of First Nations people. They call Volcano Mountain Nelruna, from the Northern Tushone language. Finally, just beyond Volcano Mountain, we reach a third Yukon waterway. The pristine Pelly River. The Pelly River flows 530 kilometers to the south and west, with a drainage area measuring 49,000 square kilometers. The first European to explore the river was fur trader Robert Campbell. He named the Pelly River in honor of Sir John Henry Pelly, governor of the Hudson's Bay Trading Company. And 5 kilometers downstream, we see signs of human civilization. Here, where the Pelly River empties into the Yukon River, Fort Selkirk has been designated a Yukon Historic Site. The buildings that have been preserved here are the final incarnation of a trading site that dates back centuries. Archaeological evidence suggests the site has been used for 8,000 years, a home to the northern Shoshone peoples, and specifically the Selkirk First Nation. In later years, Robert Campbell established a Hudson's Bay Company trading post in the area. This current site remained a key stopping point on the Yukon River for nearly a century. Continuing southeast from Fort Selkirk, we follow the path of the Yukon River. North America's third longest waterway. The word Yukon comes from the traditional Gwich'in language, meaning Great River. It is a legacy that has developed over thousands of years. The Yukon River was an immigration corridor for North America's earliest people and a transportation corridor for gold prospectors centuries later. The Yukon River remained a crucial trade route until the 1950s with the construction of the Klondike Highway. Continuing southeast, we encounter one of the few geographical obstacles on this northern waterway. Five Finger Rapids is a series of small islands, jagged chunks of reddish rock that make this stretch of river nearly unnavigable. These churning rapids and shallow channels proved especially troublesome for the early gold rush stampeders. Those who chose the eastern channel would make it through safely. The others would not have been so lucky. And just to the east, we meet the Yukon River's modern-day counterpart. The Klondike Highway provides a land route from Skagway, Alaska to Dawson City, the path taken by gold rush prospectors more than a century ago. The highway comprises 24 kilometers of roadway in Alaska, 56 kilometers in British Columbia, with the remainder passing through the Yukon. In total, the Klondike Highway measures more than 700 kilometers. Just southeast of Five Finger Rapids, we return to human civilization and one of the Klondike Highway's favorite stopping places.
Hi, I'm Steve Watson, and I'm owner of Rurn Lodge. We're in the Yukon, about 60 miles north of Whitehorse, the main city.
Rurn Lodge may be the only true landmark in Braeburn, but it wasn't always that way, with a legacy dating back to the Gold Rush trails used more than a century ago.
It used to be historic when it's been around for over 100 years, but it was on the other side of the lake when the Dawson Trail came up the other side. Then when they put this road in the 50s, the lodge got started on this side. So it's been here for quite a while.
Today, Rurn Lodge is known for a different kind of treasure.
Yeah, Rurn Lodge is famous for its cinnamon buns. They're quite large and quite tasty.
Steve Watson has won fans all over the globe with his secret recipe. Locals and tour buses alike can't seem to get enough.
A lot of people from around the world, so it's, you know, Europe and Australia, you name it, they come from all over. And they come for the cinnamon buns. How do you make them? Oh, we just make them.
As Watson surveys another crowd of hungry tourists, Janine Lowe works behind the scenes.
And this is our bakery where we make the magic happen. So here's some of our buns as they're out. Here's some more buns. We have some dough rising.
Now, with the dough ready to go, Lowe demonstrates how it's done.
All right, so this is how the buns are made. We let our dough rise. It's all risen. Knock it down a bit. I like to stretch it as I go. And then it's kind of like an art, you know? Like you gotta very delicately make sure you stretch it evenly across the table. Dough is a secret recipe that I can't show you.
Lowe coats the dough in a layer of butter, then sugar, cinnamon, and raisins.
Handful of raisins.
Finally, she's ready for the roll.
I always like to tuck it in really tight. I'm gonna go back and forth. This is where you get your workout in a day.
Next, the buns are cut and put in their own individual grease pans. Then it's the oven, where they cook for 20 minutes.
Not a job for the weak-armed. Okay, now it's time for the buns to come out. We fit about 7 on a pan. One batch makes about 21 because they get so big. finally, we have to ice the buns before they can go to the customer because it's no good without the icing. It's special Braeburn icing. Drizzle it everywhere. Just drizzle it across. Now we wrap them up and hand them out to the customer, hot and fresh for all the buses, tourists, and locals that come by.
Finally, the Klondike Highway's favorite treats are ready to go.
Job well done.
Back in front, Steve Watson watches another happy crowd continue on their way. He's been in Braeburn for decades and can't imagine life anywhere else.
Oh, I just sort of changed my profession, I guess. I used to be in construction, building houses. I just needed a change, and that was 25 years ago, and I'm still here. I just love living here, especially when none of the people are around, and you're pretty well with nature. You know, we get to see all the birds and the animals and everything else, the extreme weather. It's quite a nice place to live.
Continuing south from Braeburn and Rurn Lodge, the waters of the Yukon River widen. Here, the Yukon River becomes known as Lake Labarge. Lake Labarge gained its fame during the Gold Rush, a navigational challenge to mariners traveling from Skagway, Alaska. With ice covering the lake well into the spring and summer months. Finally, continuing south, we return to civilization as we soar high above the largest city in Canada's north, Whitehorse. While the Whitehorse region has been known to First Nations groups for centuries, the area became a popular stopping place during the Gold Rush. By 1897, campsites lined the banks of the Yukon River, full of prospectors eager to reach Dawson. And in 1900, Whitehorse would change forever with the arrival of the railroad, connecting Whitehorse to Skagway in the south. Amazingly, more than a century later, that railroad continues to thrive.
My name is Stephen Caulfield, and I'm a brakeman, and I'm also a conductor too on the White Pass, but today I'm the brakeman. This railroad originally went from Skagway to Whitehorse 110 miles, and it was built because it was the shortest landmass to go across, to come from the ocean to the river to go to Dawson City.
Prior to the railroad, travelers faced bleak options when traveling from Skagway on the coast to the safety of the Yukon River.
People were hiking up the Chilu Trail 33 miles from Skagway to Lake Bennett, and then they'd build a boat and float down the rapids and the river, Yukon River, to Dawson City, where the gold was.
But building a railroad of this magnitude was no simple task.
To build this railroad, they had to use a lot of dynamite, and they used a drill, and it was a hand drill, and one person would hold the drill like this, and a man over here would make a pound, and then he'd turn it 90 degrees, and a man over here would make a pound. So they all had to have a lot of trust in each other. And once they got the holes deep enough, they put black powder in there and some mud on top and a fuse, and then they blasted the rock. And then they used big steel wheelbarrows, all by hand, and hauled all the rocks and dumped the rocks and did all the grading. And they had camps along the way with tents and cook stoves and cooks and where they slept and worked. And in total, 35,000 men actually worked on this railroad in the 2 years, 2 months, and 2 days that it took to build.
For travelers today, that massive effort means a chance to experience incredible beauty.
The route goes along the mountainsides for the first 20 miles. It has grades mostly of 2.7% and a few 3.9% grades. Then it gets up on top and it goes along level quite a ways through the little rock piles or the glacier had left. And then it heads down into Fraser, down a pretty steep grade into Fraser, and then heads up to Log Cabin, which is the highest point on the railroad at 3,300 feet. And then it heads back down again, down into Lake Bennett. And then right there at the south end of the lake, there's a big station where we all stop and have lunch. And then we go the 26 miles along the lake. However, the part past that goes through the trees and winds around. There's a few grades and a few bridges that gets to Whitehorse.
With a decline in mining, the White Pass and Yukon Route Railway stopped service in the 1980s. But the stop was temporary. Today, it is popular like never before.
So the railroad started just as a passenger railroad in 1988, no more freight. And from then we have grown. And in those days, we probably had 25 to 30 cars, now we have 91.
Number 1, 4 more cars.
Stephen Caulfield says riding the railroad never gets old. But for him, it is even more special. It is a part of his family's legacy.
My connection to it was one of my great uncles was a packer over the White Pass in 1898. And when I went to college in Fairbanks, and I decided to come down here, and they hired me, and I've had a great time. It's meant a lot, and I met lots and lots of fun people, and it's fun to go to work every day, and we're all kind of like a family, and it's really been a good life for me.
South of the city of Whitehorse and into the province of British Columbia, the shores of Lake Bennett are a scenic wonder. In the days of the White Pass and Yukon Route Railroad, the town of Bennett, British Columbia, was a key stop between Skagway and Whitehorse. But before the railroad, the lake marked the end of a dangerous trek known as the Chilu Trail. Prospectors walked here from Alaska, through the mountains, in search of a water route to Dawson City. It is a region with a unique history that has been preserved on these shores.
My name's Christine Hedgecock, and I work with the Field Patrol on the Chilu Trail National Historic Site of Canada. Well before the gold rush, the First Nations were trading from the coast to the interior First Nations. The Chilu Trail gives access to the interior from the Pacific Ocean over the coast mountains and into the Yukon water drainage. It's a narrow passageway, it's a natural flightway, it's a natural travel path.
While the trail was used by First Nations residents for generations, it quickly became popular to the outside world with rumors of gold.
The Stampeders came up in they had started coming up here in the early 1890s, even the 1880s, and but it wasn't the main part of the rush. The high point of the rush was the years of 1897, 1898, and thousands of people had come from the south, come right across Canada, come out of the United States, come from all over the world, and were involved in this stampede, this gold rush.
The trail measured 53 kilometers, and it wasn't easy.
Just reading the diaries of the Stampeders, they described difficult times, and they needed to bring supplies that would last a year, and this essentially measured up to about a ton of goods, and they hauled that for up to 3 months.
Today, hikers and visitors can see the imprint that remains of Bennett, from the town's historic church to the barracks of the Northwest Mounted Police and their superintendent, Sam Steele.
So now we're walking along Victoria Street, along the river here, and this, on either side of us, there were all the clapboard buildings, the hotels, and we're going to head down here and get to the Northwest Mounted Police Post.
Amazingly, discarded pots, pans, and broken bottles of the era remain.
Behind me would have been the Dawson Hotel, a 2-story structure that was about 4 windows wide on the walls. And right behind us here we have the Northwest Mounted Police Post. And this would have been the very spot that Sam Steele would have stood and watched the flotilla depart at the end of May in 1898.
Further, a century-old stone wall marks the former home of architect Francis Rattenbury, who would later be remembered as one of British Columbia's foremost architects.
He moved up here from Victoria and came to live up here and run one of the paddle wheel companies, and this is the location where he lived.
But at the top of the hill, Bennett's proudest structure still stands.
This is St. Andrew's Presbyterian Church, built in the spring of 1899. The community built it up around a canvas wall tent and continued to have services while the church was being built. It was built and designed by the Reverend John Sinclair from Lanark County, Ontario. This is the sole standing building left from the Gold Rush era. It's amazing that it's still here with us. And you can see the decorative motif on the building. And that echoes the romantic high Victorian Gothic revival that was going on at the time. Lots of churches echo that architectural tradition, and this church does too. And it's built out of slab wood, and you can see how the planks are on an angle here, and that gives the building a lot more rigidity and strength. And at this time that they were looking for the wood to build this church, they were milling the railroad ties for the train, and a lot of slab wood was available, and they used this on the church.
Thousands visit the former town of Bennett, British Columbia each year. And while the 800 boats that once lined these shores are now gone, Christine Hedgecock says echoes of the past remain.
With the imprint of the town site of Bennett, it's an expression of a very fast, tiny moment in history that happened here. It left an impact, and now the landscape, the historic landscape. It's still here. We can sense that it's here. And however, we also kind of sense that nature is reclaiming the town site, reclaiming all these areas that the stampede went through. And it's got echoes of how it was when the First Nation traders came to Bennett, and it was a meeting place for the interior peoples to meet the coastal peoples.
High above Lake Bennett, soaring landscapes continue as far as the eye can see. And here, just beyond the southern edge of the lake, we cross the American border and enter the state of Alaska. It is an incredible rugged frontier with peaks more than 2 kilometers high, separating us from the historic town of Skagway and the Pacific Ocean beyond. These are the landscapes and waterways that have been braved by First Nations residents for generations. And more recently experienced by gold prospectors, embarking on a journey to Dawson City, more than 600 kilometers away. From the historic town of Dawson City, to the First Nation settlement and Hudson Bay Company trading post at Fort Selker, to the city of Whitehorse and the shores of Lake LaBarge. The Klondike Trail is an unimaginable journey through time. With its historic roaring rivers, ethereal fall colors, and its timeless roadways and railways. The Yukon has been a source of treasure for generations. And will continue to be a journey full of riches far into the future. Here, on the edge of Canada.